All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our next episode of Executive Edge. Executive Edge is a speaker series sponsored by the Office of Executive Programs at the University of Georgia, Terry College of Business, featuring discussions with corporate thought leaders and UGA faculty offering in-depth previews of our professional development programs and faculty expertise. My name is Jason Parrish. I'm the Associate Director of Learning Solutions for the Terry Executive Education Center in Atlanta, and I'll be hosting these discussions via LinkedIn Live on the UGA Executive Education page at noon on select Wednesdays throughout the year. Today, we're very excited to bring you a discussion on cybersecurity readiness with Dr. Dave Chatterjee. Dr. Chatterjee is a UGA professor and author of the recently published book, Cybersecurity Readiness, a Holistic and High-Performance Approach. Dr. Chatterjee is a professor in the Department of Management Information Systems at our very own Terry College of Business, as well as a visiting professor at Duke University's Pratt School of Engineering. His interest and expertise lies in the various facets of information technology management, with a current focus on cybersecurity and enterprise digitization.
So, folks, I'm delighted to be here this afternoon. Thank you for joining. I'm excited sharing some insights from my book, Cybersecurity Readiness, a Holistic and High-Performance Approach. It was published in March of this year by Sage Publishing. I'm also excited that we have attendees ranging from students, cybersecurity professionals, business and technology leaders, educators, consultants. That's a fabulous spectrum. And that's precisely what I want. I'm a firm believer that we need to make cybersecurity conversation more mainstream. I also firmly believe that everyone has a role to play in enhancing the overall state of cyber readiness. Cybersecurity is a phenomenon that cannot, should not, will not be dominated by a certain discipline. It is multidisciplinary, and it's a pretty major problem, and we need expertise and help from all kinds of areas, all kinds of discipline. And I'll get into that more as we go along. So here are some basic standard disclaimers. I'm going to skip the slide, move on to, by the way, Jason, thank you for that very kind introduction. It's been truly a pleasure being at the University of Georgia. I love being in the classroom, teaching students at the undergraduate and graduate level. I teach classes in information technology and strategy, business process management. And in my class in information technology and strategy, cybersecurity has been a learning module since probably 2010. So I have been working in the area of cybersecurity for a long time. And I'm also delighted to have the opportunity to teach a class at Duke University's Pratt School of Engineering in their Master's in Cybersecurity program. The class is titled Cybersecurity Program Development Operations and Analysis. So I'm excited about that as well. As far as our agenda for this afternoon goes, I'll provide you a little bit of an overview of the cybersecurity journey that I'm on. We'll talk about the epidemic that is upon us. Then we'll look at some well-known attacks that will give us a sense in terms of how vulnerable organizations are, how vulnerable we are. And we need to do a lot better than what we've been doing so far. I'll emphasize the human factor here, which is critical. Then we'll finally talk about some recommendations based on the commitment, preparedness, and discipline framework that I present in my book. We'll close with some thoughts. So that's kind of the plan. Hope you all have a good and valuable experience. So like I said earlier, I've been working in the area of cybersecurity for over a decade. I've been privileged to get the opportunity to present at practitioner and academic forums globally. This is probably my 75th or 80th talk on this subject. But every time I get this opportunity, I learn so much. I gain so much insights, gain so much perspective. So I'm truly grateful for such opportunities. And again, in the spirit of making the cybersecurity conversation more mainstream, I welcome opportunities to connect with the general masses, talk in a language that everyone understands. We do not need to make cybersecurity any more complicated than it already is. Using simple terms, simple language, that's the way to connect with everybody. That's the way to make people aware of what the challenges are and how everyone can play an important role in fighting this war or battle or protecting ourselves from potential attacks. So it's been a great, great journey so far. It's troubling, but it's been very illuminating. I've thoroughly enjoyed partnering with practitioners at various levels, doing webinars. Have also published, in addition to my book, I have published other articles in the field. You're welcome to go to the Harvard Business Publishing website and search by the article names, such as Muddling Through Cybersecurity Insights from the US Healthcare Industry. A more recent publication is Calculated Risk, a cybersecurity evaluation tool for SMEs. In fact, Mike Benz, one of the co-authors, or he's the main author of this article, he just was on a podcast which is released today. So you'll enjoy hearing Mike talk about how can SMEs get some help. It doesn't have to be a very expensive proposition for securing small and medium-sized enterprises. And then I had authored an article, I think in 2019, where I wanted to get the attention of senior management. And it was titled, Should Executives Go to Jail Over Cybersecurity Breaches? Obviously, the answer is you don't want that to happen. You don't want legislation to come down heavily on businesses and practitioners, but it is imperative that top management engage. And the good news is that's happening. I'm also excited about launching the Cybersecurity Readiness Podcast, which started in June. As I said just a while back, I released the 9th episode this morning. This is an opportunity to talk to subject matter experts from a variety of disciplines who can shed light on the phenomena, talk about their experiences, how they are contributing to help address this ongoing problem. Talking about the cyber attack epidemic, we all know that it's been around us, upon us for a long time. No industry or organization is being spared. In fact, organizations are in a perpetual state of vulnerability, and they have no choice but to deal with this existential threat head on. If you see the consequences, we are all familiar with the loss of revenue, loss of potential business opportunities, drop in stock value, loss of reputation. It goes on and on. And then, like I said earlier, small and medium-sized businesses are heavily impacted because survey reports reveal that 60% of SMEs are known to go out of business within 6 months of being hacked. This is a very troubling stat, and we have to do better. We have to do a lot better. And then you learn about the attacks on critical infrastructure. We are all too familiar with the Colonial Pipeline attack, the attack on JBS Foods, and there are many others that's been happening. Some get more media coverage than others. But what concerns me is this attack on critical infrastructure. I will not be surprised if we see any of this happening. I don't wish it, but it is very much in the realm of possibility. Collapse of the financial market, contamination of water supply, all kinds of unfortunate things can happen. And we can do our part to prevent it from happening if we stay proactive. A while back, Warren Buffett made this statement, and I believe he is spot on. So, why are we dealing with this perpetual state of cyber threat? It's because the more digitized we get, the more electronically our systems connect, the more mobile our workforce becomes, the greater the use of smart devices, the more vulnerable we get. And then there is the constant evolution of attack vectors. As I speak, probably there is another innovative attack method emerging. It's hard to keep up with these hackers, especially companies that have been formed with goals and objectives. They have not been formed to focus on cyber attacks. But unfortunately, cyber attacks or protecting organizations from cyber attack is the cost of doing business today. That's the unfortunate reality that we cannot get away from. So we have to confront it head on. And we don't confront it head on by just generating a whole bunch of cybersecurity professionals. They are part of the solution, ladies and gentlemen. They are not the whole solution. And let me repeat, unless everyone plays their role, does their part, no organization will be protected. There is no technology out there that by itself will be that miracle protection or that miracle cure. The technologies, the processes backed by highly aware humans, that's what it will take. It'll have to be a multi-pronged approach to deal with the cybersecurity epidemic. Just as an FYI, these are the top 5 cybersecurity threats that plague organizations the world over. There's an increasing use of artificial intelligence to trigger these attacks. And it just gets more sophisticated. And on the flip side, it becomes even more challenging to deal with it. So it's a constant battle, and you have to be prepared. The state of readiness needs to be very high. So to summarize this section, cybersecurity is a cost of doing business today. The consequences of ignoring cyber threats or paying half-hearted attention is a recipe for disaster. Cybersecurity must be treated as a strategic competency, and it needs to be developed if organizations want to thrive and succeed in today's environment. It's not something that you can outsource and hope for the best. You have to invest. It needs to be centric to your organizational goals, to your organizational values, and that's the right posture, that's the right approach. So I will move on to the next section on attacks and vulnerabilities. And I'll kind of flip through these slides, giving you a quick overview of these breaches and what caused the breaches. The recent Colonial Pipeline breach, this occurred because there wasn't a multi-factor authentication in place. I have a hard time believing it. The Capital One breach happened because the web application firewall wasn't properly configured. And also, the breach was detected not in a timely manner. There was a late detection of breach. Then let's look at the British Airways attack. Customers were the victim. There was a JavaScript vulnerability that was exploited. And once again, this vulnerability was not fixed despite feedback. And there was a lack of robust monitoring capabilities. These insights have been gleaned from media reports as well as from court documents. The Equifax breach, and we are all aware of this breach which happened a little while back. The advice to apply software patches released were ignored. The advice of a security firm that gave them the advance heads up, that gave them the warning, was ignored. The scanning systems failed to flag the vulnerabilities. The networks were not adequately segmented more and more. The Yahoo attack. An employee fell victim to a spear phishing email, and that's all it took, folks. So just one person has to get compromised and all hell can break loose, because the more connected the systems are, once the hackers are able to penetrate into one system, they can spread to all the other systems. So therefore, everyone needs to do their part and needs to provide a strong defense so they are not compromised. And that's a really hard challenge. But let's face the reality, that is the challenge that we have to confront. The Anthem breach. An employee once again became a victim of a phishing attack. The company was unaware of the breach for a year. Hard to believe, isn't it? But that's been the reality in many cases. And then there is this delay in notifying the victims. Once again, according to the courts, that's negligence that no organization can afford. So I can just go on, and I will move a little faster in the interest of time, and I'll get to some inferences based on my review of the various breaches that have happened over the last several years. So what are the key messages? The courts have found organizations to be grossly negligent. They have been found to lack transparency in terms of awareness, in terms of communication. The preparation has been inadequate. As I said a little earlier, the communication hasn't been great. So to sum it up, the overall state of cybersecurity readiness, whether it's at the public sector level or the private sector level, is far from optimal. Now, does that mean that every organization is doing poorly? Not at all. In fact, I see a lot of best practices out there, but we can do better. And it's an evolving problem. And so we need to constantly monitor and keep improving our processes, keep improving our technologies, keep training our people. It's not like you engage in the fixes, engage in the remedial measures, and then that's it. You can rest on your laurels. You have to be at it. So talking about the human vulnerability factor, as you probably know, humans have been the victim or have been the focus of the hackers. Many of the major breaches have happened because one or a couple of humans, their accounts were compromised, their credentials were stolen. And as this statistic suggests, 99% of the attacks are focused on exploiting human vulnerabilities. So once again, hackers are totally aware of this. We need to recognize that the people in the organization who get compromised are not the cybersecurity specialists. We absolutely need them, but we also need to raise the level of awareness, level of knowledge, level of skill sets amongst the other organizational members at all levels. So everyone needs to be trained, deserves to be trained, and must strive to maintain a certain level of cyber hygiene and discipline. So now let's talk about cybersecurity readiness factors. What I have discussed in the book, based on collection of data, analysis of data, looking at a variety of industries, it essentially boils down to creating a high-performance information security culture. Unless you create that culture, you're unlikely to sustain a high level of readiness. You're going to experience peaks and valleys when there is turnover, when there is a drop in investments, when there is a drop in attention. And that's not what organizations can afford. So therefore, effort has to be made to create and sustain a high performance information security culture. Now, the moment you use the word culture, many people go, oh, well, that's too abstract. That's impossible to do. Absolutely. What I'm about to share will give you a sense of how complicated this challenge is and how it needs to be attacked in a very multi-pronged manner. My research finds there are 17 success factors associated with the creation and sustenance of a high-performance information security culture. And these success factors come under three buckets, as I like to call them. There is the commitment trait, there is the preparedness trait, and there is the discipline trait. If you were to carefully look at these success factors, hands-on top management, we are in it together culture, cross-functional participation, sustainable budget, strategic alignment and partnerships, joint ownership and accountability, empowerment. These are not technical matters. These are leadership issues. These are governance issues that need to be addressed. You're not going to be able to deploy a fancy tool and address these issues. When we get to preparedness, I grant you that we have very sophisticated tools, technologies, excellent frameworks, one of which is offered by NIST that addresses these. But here, the problem that I see out there is the effective implementation. You can get all the great advice in the world, you can have all the best frameworks in the world, but it is how you execute, how effectively you execute. And if you can sustain that level of execution for a period of time, that's the difference between an organization which is operating at a high level of information security, governance maturity, and an organization that is not. And as you can tell, there are so many things that an organization has to address. Like I said, 17 factors. That's the reason why, despite all the efforts, organizations might still get breached. Organizations get breached. But if efforts have been made, if the due diligence has been robust, if all these factors that I talk about, and again, you don't have to go with mine, you can go with any other framework that you prefer, you like, that's approved by your industry. If you really follow through well, and you're just not checking the box, but you're truly making sure that you are addressing those proposed defense measures, you're going to see some success. Nobody is going to guarantee that your organization will not be breached. But I have a feeling that when you are in front of the court of public opinion or the jury, you have a much better case, because you can argue that I did everything possible, followed all that was prescribed, but despite that, this happened. I'm not sure if all organizations can claim that kind of robust due diligence. If they can, more power to them, but I think this is an opportunity to review, revisit, and make suitable adjustments. So the key messages here are, like I said, creating and sustaining a high-performance information security culture is key to helping organizations stay committed to their cybersecurity goals and operate at a high level of efficiency and effectiveness for a sustained period of time. And this is backed by data, backed by qualitative analysis of data, which revealed 17 success factors associated with 3 high-performance information security culture traits of commitment, preparedness, and discipline. Technology alone, as I said earlier, will not mitigate information security risks. There are several pieces to the complex puzzle of cybersecurity management, and technology is only one of them. Technology is a very important part. I'm not trying to suggest anything other than that. It's very important, but equally important, committed leadership, robust governance procedures, informed and motivated personnel. So that's why it needs to be a holistic approach. That's why the book is titled Cybersecurity Readiness, a Holistic and High-Performance Approach. It cannot be a myopic or a one-track approach. And finally, the battle or war against cybersecurity must be fought holistically and comprehensively by adopting people, process, and technology-driven measures. You will pardon me if I'm repeating sometimes. That is intentional, because I want a little bit of redundancy to be built in so we really understand what we are dealing with. It is much more than a technology issue. It's a business issue. It is everyone's problem. Granted, you have the CISO function that's responsible for it, but they cannot operate by themselves. They have to have the support. Everyone has a role to play. So then moving along to the specific traits, like you saw earlier, commitment is associated with 7 success factors, and I'll briefly touch upon some of them. Hands-on top management. I cannot emphasize enough how critical it is for senior management to actively engage in cybersecurity planning and strategizing. Take ownership and responsibility. The good news is it is being recognized and many organizations are following through. I had the pleasure of interviewing the CEO of a major insurance provider, and he was very explicit in stating that not only are they following through the expectations, but all their executives at all levels are committed to regular training to update their level of cybersecurity knowledge and awareness. So if his organization is to be considered an exemplar, let's hope that's the way it is for most, if not all, organizations. Am I suggesting people give up their main focus area and do cybersecurity? Am I suggesting senior leadership become cybersecurity experts? I'm not. But I am suggesting that they need to pay attention. They need to have mechanisms in place where they're getting constant feedback. It's like sending your kids to school. You still need to stay on top of things. You still need to stay committed if you want them to turn out right. Again, there are no guarantees, but that's a parent speaking here. Talking about we are in it together culture. Once again, sounds idealistic. We will never get here, but we can work towards it. And that, again, there are lots of ways to work towards it. I have made some recommendations in my book. For instance, I talk about building emotional capital, incentivizing behavior, creating awareness. The specifics of it are best gleaned after, when you review the book. At the end of the book, I have some scorecards where I also provide a checklist that you can look at to get more specific guidance. Cross-functional participation. Once again, like I said, you cannot just leave it to the CISO function to do it all. HR should be involved. Legal, huge, is to involve legal. I'm a huge fan of regular legal reviews. Once again, I recently had a legal expert on one of my podcasts, and she emphasized the importance of doing legal reviews to make sure that the organization is on the right side of the law. So getting input, getting involvement from different functions, that enhances this the recognition that cybersecurity is a problem not for the technical to solve, but it's a problem that has to be addressed organization wide. Everyone has a stake in it. Once again, this is such a challenge that unless cybersecurity funding is maintained at a certain level to be able to support and nurture initiatives, it's going to be very hard to create and sustain the high performance information security culture I'm talking about. Cybersecurity investments must be treated as strategic investments. It must get strategic priority to move in the direction of a mature cybersecurity governance model. Along similar lines, we're talking about cybersecurity strategy and the overall business strategy. They must be aligned. When any initiative is being considered, strategic initiative, the security implications must be considered. There is no problem if an organization wants to undertake a particular initiative which has a high security risk, information security risk, as long as they are going into it knowing about it. That's my point, that it has to be a deliberate decision, planned out decision, and security must feature in the conversation. Joint ownership and accountability. Now, this is a kind of a difficult area, because when organizations outsource a lot of their security work, or when they are maintaining data in external servers, it is still their responsibility. The vendor will not take responsibility, but that's where I would encourage organizations to review their agreements, their SLAs, and to see if you can find some kind of a balance, some kind of a way where you can even get the service provider to make a high level of commitment, to get to that state of joint ownership and accountability, because then you're not left alone trying to figure out how best to secure servers that are owned by a third-party service provider. Their personnel are also on it, are also supporting you. They have a stake in it as well. So they're just not renting out the capabilities, they're also providing you with appropriate support service. So that's something, I put it out there. Do the best you can. I know it's not an easy fix, but it's worth considering. As I mentioned earlier, hiring a CISO, having a CISO function in place is critical. They play a hugely important role in organizations. But it is imperative that the CISO is appropriately empowered. It is imperative that CISO has direct access to top leadership. Do everything that you can to make the CISO function as objective as possible. If they can have their own independent budget, if they can report independently to an external body like a committee, an executive committee or an audit committee, whatever the right label and structure might be, giving them that freedom of being able to raise red flags, being able to come out and state clearly what the issues are is hugely important. So it's no point having a CISO as a front. It's important to make a substantive investment in an effective CISO, in an effective CISO function. So to summarize this section, cybersecurity is a business issue that demands top management attention. We have to take a multi-pronged approach if we are trying to create and sustain a truly cohesive culture driven towards securing the organization. Cross-functional participation is key. The involvement of legal, the involvement of HR, getting the security and the quality control teams to work together, hugely important. Treating cybersecurity investments as strategic is an imperative. And finally, last but not the least, empower the CISO function so they can be effective. Moving along to preparedness. Once again, at a high level, we are talking about identifying what we need to protect, then developing response and recovery capabilities, detection capabilities, and providing layers and layers of protection. The NIST framework covers these very well, so I don't want to go through them all over again, but I'll highlight a few things. This was an interesting stat. For 80% of the respondents, not knowing what systems are part of their IT environment was the number one issue that led to them being breached. And this is a problem that many organizations face, large organizations. So knowing what your attack surfaces are, being able to do a cyber risk assessment and prioritize what to protect and at what level is critical. Taking a defense in-depth approach is always the right approach. There is no one best control. Having a set of controls, physical, technical, administrative, having a combination of controls is always the right approach. And there are tons of controls out there that needs to be leveraged depending on the needs and what the organization can afford. I can't emphasize once again the importance of regular backup. One thing is to back up, whether it's offline and online. The other thing is to regularly test your backups, whether it's working. When the need arises, can you rely on your backups? How well is that being handled? We are all familiar with the things to do. The question we have to ask ourselves, how well are we doing this? What's the basis of saying that we are doing it well? So we have to be kind of critical of ourselves, of how we follow through with the prescribed procedures. And that will throw up areas of vulnerabilities, areas of shortcomings that we should address, and we will all be better for it. Another area that demands a lot of attention is training. Training cannot be like a one-shot training to check the box, because training is required. Hire a team or hire a service provider, they'll provide this training, and you've done what is expected of you. I think training needs to be, a lot of thought needs to be given to training. Training needs to be customized. It needs to be focused. There needs to be some sort of regular assessment to see whether the training is truly having an impact, and make it as fun, as interactive, as engaging as possible. There are lots of great software out there, immersive programs out there that you can leverage as an organization, but do have an assessment mechanism in place to gauge whether the training is effective. And one size doesn't fit all. You have to customize it. You have to make it more targeted. Hugely important. This is key, and special attention must be given to awareness and training. As far as business continuity planning goes, there are lots of things that needs to be done, and this is probably, I don't have enough time to go through all of them, but what I'll emphasize is, are you testing the plan? Is it being regularly rehearsed? When you need to execute the plan, will you be able to do so successfully? That's the point. When it comes to detection, one of my concerns is, yes, you're gathering the intelligence. What procedures do you have in place to properly record what you find, and also to record what you do with it? How effective is your logging and response mechanism? That's where I find some vulnerabilities here. There are lots of things that can be done to have a very strong detection capability. Many organizations are doing it, but they tend to falter when it comes to effectively managing the intelligence, effectively leveraging the intelligence. What's the point of getting the intelligence if you're not going to act on it and you're not going to be prompt about it. That's critical. Once again, I'm a huge fan of regular testing. Whatever the plan you have, that's great. Have the right teams, but regular testing is key. So, as to summarize, you want a risk-based asset prioritization system. You want to adopt a defense-in-depth approach to secure your asset. Act promptly upon receiving intelligence. Continuously test your data backup and recovery. Regularly rehearse your business continuity planning methods. And last but not the least, let this not be a check the box approach. Let it be a more substantive, thoughtful approach where you as an organization, you're trying to ensure that whatever you are doing, whether it's training or something else, your heart and soul is in it, you're totally committed, and you have ways of measuring progress. Finally, in the discipline section, we are talking about creating a comprehensive information security governance policy, documenting it, making sure you have representation across functions who are involved in policy formulation. There is frequent review. What's the point of having a policy if it is never used, if it is never enforced? So it's very important to pay attention to those things. Communication. Once again, similar to training, communication needs to be customized. Communication needs to be targeted. A blanket, one-size-fits-all communication, which I've often seen, doesn't work. You're unlikely to get the attention of the constituents if you continue with that approach. You might be able to check off the box, but if you truly want to get the attention of the various stakeholders, you have to customize information security communication. I'm sure many organizations have a continuous monitoring schedule, which is hugely important. There are lots of great tools out there to be used. But once again, monitoring is great, but what is equally important is what you do with the findings, how quickly you act on them. When it comes to performance assessment, cybersecurity performance assessment also has to be measured holistically. There are a variety of measures out there. I just wanted to bring to your attention that here are some representative dimensions of cybersecurity performance assessment. I talk about these measures in my book. I'm sure there are others out there. Whatever you do, make sure you're addressing all the dimensions, and it's not a unidimensional approach to performance assessment. This is, again, I'm hugely passionate about having regular security audits and drills. Just like we have fire drills, we need to have information security drills, and organizations need to test their recovery capabilities. How quickly and how effectively an organization can recover from an attack is a measure of their cybersecurity performance maturity. So it needs to be tested on a regular basis. And finally, when it comes to engaging experts for penetration testing, red team exercises, these are great things to do, but are you keeping a log or a record of actions taken? Exercises are great, but what are you doing with the findings? Are you acting on the findings? That is equally important, if not more important. So to conclude this section, a monitoring schedule should be in place and followed meticulously. Effective communication must be customized and targeted. There must be regular audits, regular drills, and you must act on the findings. Cannot emphasize enough the importance of periodic legal reviews as often as possible without making it too burdensome. So in closing, folks, I spoke to you about 17 success factors which are associated with 3 high-performance information security culture traits. of commitment, preparedness, and discipline. Once again, that's a lot to address and to address well. That's why cybersecurity is such a challenge. But we cannot shy away from it. We have to approach it head on, and we have to take a multi-pronged approach. And that's what I have been trying to accomplish through my talks, through my writings. I'm not an expert, but hopefully I'm one of the many voices to emphasize what's important as organizations strive to protect themselves from this terrible epidemic, which unfortunately I don't think will go away. We have to learn to live with it. And when it comes to the state of readiness, once again, I'm providing you with a screenshot from my book where I provide a detailed checklist of things to do that you can review and look at what you're already doing. And that'll give you a sense of validation or help you identify areas for improvement. So hopefully you'll find some value if you choose to buy the book, read it, and I'm always available for your questions or any comments or any question, anything that I can offer, in addition to the insights that's provided in the book. I greatly appreciate the opportunity of presenting to you all. Thank you for your time, and have a great rest of the day.
Dave, by the way, I'm still here. I guess bad timing for a technology glitch earlier, and we've got a few minutes left here, so I did want to let you know we've got a few questions from the audience here that I want to share, and I appreciate everybody kind of sticking with us. If anybody has any additional questions, feel free to drop them in the chat here. But one here I wanted to pass your way, Dave, is it says you mentioned that regulation and legislation in this space are not robust. This could be contributing to a lackadaisical attitude from executive leadership. What is happening in the regulation space? Are there stricter guidelines being imposed, especially in the light of the recent increase in attacks?
Okay, great question. So this is the way I would like to put it. There are regulations out there. There is GDPR in Europe, and there are regulations. In fact, in my book, in the appendices, I cover several of them. Some are specifically developed for cybersecurity purposes. Some have been around, but which also have teeth into this problem. So it's not like legislations are not there, but it is my hunch that we might get to a point where we might see the enactment of something like SOX that was required to get organizations to fairly report statement of affairs. I hope we don't get there. But do we have enough laws right now to help govern the cybersecurity needs of an organization? I'm no security expert, but based on the information that I have gathered and the folks I've spoken with, I believe we do. But it's a matter of, so that's why I talked about legal reviews. Have regular legal reviews with your experts. Let them point out what are the things that could get you in trouble. So that's kind of the way I would approach it, as opposed to just being caught blind.
Excellent point. Just one other, or a couple of other questions here. So let's see. So assuming most people listening in today probably realize or somewhat interested in the importance of cybersecurity. What other tips would you give them to convince others in their organization, maybe even their leadership, of that importance?
Well, if my talk, they should share this recording. Hopefully, the technology worked and the recording is available. And if they can't hear the entire 1 hour, they can pick from the talk. I would be surprised if it needs any convincing. When we see the media reports, whether it's a colonial attack or any other kind of attack, if I'm the CEO of a company, I don't want my company's name out there that I've been a victim of this attack. I have to spend so much money, and then I'm in the court of law, or I'm appearing before the congressional committee, and I'm looking, for lack of a better word, stupid, because I didn't do my due diligence. So I don't believe it needs any convincing, but this is an attempt to remind people that yes, you're in the business of making shoes or of making or selling something else, but unfortunately, you also have to address cybersecurity every step of the way, because a mishap there could derail an organization, especially for organizations which manage critical infrastructure. The impact can be even more catastrophic. If the pandemic has taught us anything, it has taught us that we need to be proactive, because otherwise the problem can get way, way out of hand.
Absolutely. And I think important to mention, provided this recorded did work appropriately, I will be sharing this with everybody after the segments over here. Another question that just came through, you mentioned that organizations need full commitment to protecting their security processes. What are some specific methods through your research that you have discovered to create commitment to security in non-cyber employees?
Great question. I don't know if we have the time, it's 55, to specifically discuss them. Great question. I'd love to have a sidebar. I would encourage the person who's asked the question to read the book. And if the answer is not there, I'd love to have a longer discussion on commitment and training. It starts literally at the kindergarten level, when we need to start instilling in people the security mindset. And that needs to be nurtured throughout. Even in colleges, I'm a huge proponent of making a cybersecurity class, the fundamentals of cybersecurity class, as a core in the curriculum. It shouldn't be saved for a cybersecurity track. It should be part of your general education. That's how you kind of start raising the level of awareness from a very early stage. Then it helps, because once then the student becomes an employee, then it helps the organization to reinforce certain things, because the foundation has already been laid. So the foundations to commitment, preparedness, and discipline needs to be laid at the university level, at a high school level. I don't know if that's possible, at least at the university level. That would be a good start. If not, it'll require some workshops, some training. Do I have a specific example, an exemplar of how it is being done? I'll have to go and look at my data set. I can't think of any one particular at this moment, but great question.
All right. And I'll, unless we get any more that come through here, I'll give you one more here. What if an organization lacks the resources to hire a CISO, at least in the offset? Where could they start within the organization to start down the road to a solid cybersecurity management system?
They should take my class at Duke in spring. They will get answers to all their to all these questions, because I'll be addressing them, addressing these questions in the class of what are the foundations, good foundations. How do you lay a good foundation to a cybersecurity program development, monitoring, assessment? How do you go about hiring? That's a $1 million question. Hiring a good CISO, because a lot of the CISOs that are out there, they don't have any formal CISO type training. There are lawyers who are working as CISOs. There are people who are coming from other fields who are working at CISOs. And I don't want to draw any value judgments here, but it's an interesting situation. This field is just happening, evolving. There are lots of jobs out there, not enough talent. The talent is being developed. Training has started. It might be a while before we achieve a higher level of maturity. but nothing stops anybody from taking classes that are available, sometimes for free, sometimes on LinkedIn. You don't even have to take the certification test, but you can go through the prep and you learn so much. So a lot of it depends on the individual initiative. And I would do it just to protect myself. I wouldn't even wait to be incentivized or being told by my company that I need to do it. I would just do it to enhance my knowledge level. That's how important, that's how centric cybersecurity is.
Excellent point. And I would, just to piggyback on that, and then I'll close this out here, but, encourage you all to follow, what we're doing in our UGA Exec Ed as well, because we are going to be talking to Dr. Chatterjee about offering some maybe corporate training and development programs in the area in the future. So we'll certainly, hopefully have something in the works soon that we can share with you all that may be helpful in that arena as well. So, with that, we'll go ahead and, I think we're up on time here, but if you are interested in learning more, you've got Dr. Chatterjee's contact information there. Certainly feel free to reach out to us either here on LinkedIn, or through our website. Our contact information is there as well. This chat will stay live even after this session's over. So, drop your questions, comments in there as well, and we'll get in touch with you and answer your questions or get connected. So stay tuned. Next, in a couple weeks from now, Wednesday, October the 13th, we'll be doing another talk. This one on account-based marketing with Dr. Piyush Kumar. And we thank everybody once again for joining us today, and a special thank you to you, Dr. Chatterjee. This was enlightening and certainly very interesting. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Jason, again for the opportunity, and thank you to the attendees for taking time out of their busy schedule. I look forward to hearing from you. Feel free to reach out with any questions or clarifications that you might have.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.